Something you did recently, a decision, a choice, an act of faith or courage or integrity that may have seemed small to everyone around you, was not small in the spiritual realm. It was enormous. It moved something in heaven that had been waiting to move. It unlocked a door that had been sealed. And the miracle that is now in motion in your life, the one you have been praying for, waiting for, holding on to through the hardest seasons, that miracle is directly connected to what you just did. Stay right here, because you need to understand what happened. There are moments in a person's life that look ordinary from the outside, but are anything but ordinary in the spiritual realm. Moments where a decision is made quietly, privately, without audience or applause, that shifts something in the invisible world, where a choice is made that aligns the person making it so completely with the purposes of God that heaven responds, not eventually, not after a period of evaluation, immediately, with the full force of a God who has been waiting for exactly this alignment, who has been positioning resources and people and timing around this person for exactly this moment, and who now, because the person finally moved in the direction he was pointing, releases what he had prepared. You had one of those moments recently. I want to be careful about how I say this, because I want you to receive it with the weight it deserves, and not let it slide past as religious language that sounds inspiring, but does not land in the reality of your life. Something you did recently, something specific, something that you may not have fully understood the significance of when you did it, registered in the spiritual realm as an act of extraordinary faith, of genuine obedience, of the specific kind of courage that God honors above almost anything else. The courage of a person who does the right thing when doing the wrong thing would have been so much easier, and heaven responded. Now, before we go further, I need to address something honestly, because I think it is important, and I think you deserve directness rather than just inspiration. I do not know exactly what your recent action was. God knows. You know. And the spiritual principle I'm about to walk you through is real and grounded in Scripture. But I want to be honest that the specific application of it to your exact situation is something only you can fully discern. What I can do is give you the framework, the truth about how God responds to the faithfulness of His chosen ones, and trust that as you hear it, your own spirit will connect it to the specific thing that happened in your life recently. Because here is what I know to be true. If you are watching this video, you have been walking a road that has required consistent, quiet, unwitnessed faithfulness. Not the performed kind, the real kind. The kind that happens when nobody is watching and the choice is genuinely costly and you make it anyway because something in you, something deeper than calculation, deeper than what is convenient, simply will not let you do otherwise. God sees that faithfulness, every act of it, every moment of it, every time you chose integrity when compromise was available, every time you extended grace when bitterness would have been justified, every time you kept moving forward in faith when every visible signal said stop, every time you forgave when holding on to the offense would have felt like protection, every time you gave when keeping felt more logical, every time you spoke truth when silence would have been easier. All of it has been accumulating, not in a mechanical, transactional way, as if God keeps a ledger and dispenses blessings in proportion to good behavior. That is not how this works, but in a different way, a deeper way. The way that a seed accumulates everything it needs, water, nutrients, warmth, time, until the moment arrives when everything that has been accumulating is sufficient to produce what the seed was always designed to produce. Not one drop of water too early, not 1 degree of warmth too late. Everything in its time, everything building toward the moment of emergence. Your recent action was that moment, the final accumulation, the tipping point, the specific act of faithfulness that completed the preparation and triggered the release. And what is being released is a miracle. Now, I want to define that word carefully, because miracle is a word that gets used loosely in spiritual content, and I want to use it with precision. A miracle, in the truest sense, is not simply something good happening. It is something that could not have happened through natural means alone. Something where the gap between what was possible by human effort and strategy and what actually occurred is so wide that the only bridge across it is the direct intervention of God. What is coming for you is that kind of event. not an improvement in your circumstances that could be attributed to a good decision you made or a fortunate coincidence or the natural progression of something you had been working toward. Something that, when it arrives, will be recognizable as God, unmistakably, to you and to the people around you who have been watching your life. The kind of thing that makes people who are skeptical of spiritual things go quiet. The kind of thing that does not invite debate about whether God is real because it simply makes the debate irrelevant. The kind of miracle that stands as its own argument, needing no defense, no explanation, no theological framework to make it meaningful, because it is simply, undeniably, breathtakingly real. That is what your recent action unlocked. Let me walk you through what happened spiritually when you made that choice. What occurred in the invisible realm that is now working its way toward visible manifestation in your life. When a chosen one makes a significant act of faith, the kind that costs them something real, the kind that is made from a place of genuine trust rather than calculation, several things happen simultaneously in the spiritual realm. The first is that spiritual authority is transferred. In every situation in your life, there is a question of spiritual jurisdiction, of who holds the authority over the outcome. The enemy works constantly to establish his authority in the circumstances of chosen ones, through fear, through compromise, through the gradual erosion of faith that he engineers through prolonged difficulty. And every time a chosen one allows fear to drive their decisions, or compromises their integrity for relief from pressure, or chooses the safe and controlled option over the God-directed one, a measure of spiritual authority over that area of their life shifts toward the darkness. But when a chosen one makes an act of genuine faith, especially an act that goes against the voice of fear, that chooses obedience over comfort, that says in its very substance, God, I trust you more than I trust what I can see, the authority shifts back dramatically. In that single act, the jurisdiction over that situation and often over connected situations that the person did not even know were linked, transfers to heaven. And heaven, holding that authority, does what heaven always does when it has jurisdiction over a situation involving one of its chosen ones. It moves. The second thing that happens is that the angels assigned to your life receive new instructions. I want to be careful here not to overstate or sensationalize. But the scripture is clear that God's angels are ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation, and that their activity in our lives is real and responsive to what is happening in the spiritual realm. When a chosen one makes a significant act of faith, the spiritual atmosphere around their life changes, and the angelic activity that is part of God's provision for that life intensifies and becomes more specifically directed toward the breakthrough that the faith act has triggered. Doors that were being held shut begin to open. Connections that were being delayed begin to move. Resources that were being withheld by spiritual obstruction begin to flow. The specific miracle that God prepared, that has been in preparation since before you were born, that has been waiting for the right spiritual conditions to be released into the natural world, begins its final movement toward manifestation. The third thing that happens is that your own spirit is repositioned. This is the most personal and most immediately experiential of the three. When you made your recent act of faith, when you chose obedience over convenience, trust over fear, something shifted in your interior. You may have felt it, a settling, a peace that arrived without logical cause, a quiet confidence that was not there before, a sense of having stepped across a threshold that you cannot step back across, and of being, for the first time in a long time, exactly where you are supposed to be. That repositioning is significant because the miracle that is coming requires a prepared receiver, and the act of faith you made was not only the trigger for the miracle, it was also the preparation of the interior ground on which the miracle will land. You are now in the right posture, the right internal orientation, the right spiritual position to receive what is coming. Welcome back, chosen one. Let me talk about what the miracle actually looks like when it arrives. Not in vague spiritual terms, in as grounded and specific terms as I can offer while speaking to a general audience, rather than knowing the exact details of your situation. Miracles that come in response to specific acts of faith tend to carry a very specific quality. They feel custom-made. They fit the exact shape of the need, or the longing, or the prayer that they are answering with a precision that random good fortune simply does not produce. When you receive a lucky break, it feels like a lucky break. Pleasant, welcome, but generic. When you receive a miracle that God prepared specifically for your story, it feels different. It feels like your name was on it, like it was built for you, like the God who sent it knew everything about your situation and your need and your history, and crafted his response to fit all of it exactly. That quality, the unmistakable sense of being specifically seen and specifically answered, is one of the ways you will know that what arrives is the miracle and not simply a fortunate circumstance. The second quality of a miracle that comes in response to a faith act is its timing. It will not arrive at the moment your patience ran out. It will not arrive at the moment that the waiting became so comfortable that you stopped urgently needing it. It will arrive at a moment that is undeniably right, a moment where the arriving makes sense in ways that only become clear in retrospect, where you can look back and see that if it had come 6 months earlier, you would not have been ready for it. If it had come a year later, something important would have been missed. It arrives at exactly the moment when its arrival produces the maximum impact, the maximum growth, the maximum glory for the God who orchestrated it. That timing is not something you can engineer. It belongs entirely to him. And when it arrives, when you feel the unmistakable rightness of the timing, that feeling is itself a confirmation that what you are experiencing is not random. It is authored. Now I want to address something that I think is important for the integrity of this message. Because there is a version of this kind of spiritual content that can become manipulative, that tells people what they want to hear in ways that are emotionally satisfying but not spiritually honest. And I want this message to be something different. I want it to be something that serves you genuinely. So let me say this clearly. Not every difficult season ends with a dramatic miracle. Not every act of faith produces an immediate and visible supernatural result. Sometimes the miracle God sends in response to your faithfulness is internal, a peace, a freedom, a healing in your soul that does not change your external circumstances, but transforms the person living inside them. Sometimes the miracle is a gradual, quiet, completely undramatic process of things shifting slowly in the right direction until you look back from a distance and realize that your life looks completely different from what it was, even though there was no single moment that you could point to as the turning point. Those miracles are real. They are not lesser because they are quieter, and a chosen one who develops the spiritual maturity to recognize God's hand in the gradual and the quiet, not just in the sudden and the dramatic, is a chosen one who lives in a constant state of gratitude and awareness that most people never access. With that said, I also believe, and I say this with full sincerity, that there are specific seasons in the lives of chosen ones when God does move suddenly, dramatically, in ways that are unmistakable and undeniable. And I believe that for some of you watching this, this is that season. I believe that the combination of the preparation you have walked through and the specific act of faithfulness you made recently has positioned you for exactly that kind of sudden, visible, breathtaking divine intervention. Hold both of those truths, the one about the quiet miracles and the one about the sudden ones, and trust God to determine which He is sending and to make it recognizable when it arrives. Now let me talk about your responsibility in the period between the faith act and the miracle's arrival. Because there is a temptation, and a very understandable, very human temptation, to act as if the faith act was the end of your participation in what God is doing. To settle into a passive waiting posture that says, I did my part, now God does His, and I simply wait for the result to appear. But that is not how divine partnership works. The faith act was not the end of your participation. It was a beginning. It was you stepping into a new level of the divine partnership, a level that requires a new level of active engagement on your part. Not anxious striving, not trying to force the miracle to happen on your timeline, but a specific, engaged, forward-moving faithfulness that is consistent with what the faith act declared. If your act of faith was an act of generosity, then continue to live generously, not as a formula to keep the miracle coming, but as an expression of who the act revealed you to be. If it was an act of forgiveness, continue to live in the freedom that forgiveness produces. If it was an act of obedience in a specific direction, moving toward something God had been pointing you toward, then keep moving. Keep taking the next step. Keep showing up in the direction you chose, trusting that the provision and the confirmation and the miracle will meet you in the movement rather than in the waiting. God honors continuing faith. Not just the faith act that was the turning point, but the daily, ordinary, unremarkable faithfulness that follows it. The miracle meets you on the road, not at the place where you stopped and waited. Keep walking. I want to speak now about the people in your life who will witness the miracle when it arrives, because their response to it is something God has also been preparing, and understanding it in advance will help you navigate it well. Some of the people around you will celebrate what God does in your life with genuine, uncomplicated joy. These are the people who have stood with you in the difficult seasons, who prayed for you and believed for you and refused to speak doubt over your story, even when doubt would have been reasonable. Their celebration will be pure. Receive it fully and gratefully. Others will respond with something more complicated, with a joy that is real, but that carries underneath it a quiet unsettling, a confrontation with the implications of your miracle for their own story, an involuntary comparison between what God is doing in your life and what they feel He is not yet doing in theirs. This response is not malicious, it is human, and your ability to handle it with grace, to celebrate what God has done without making anyone around you feel that your blessing is a commentary on their waiting, will be one of the marks of the character that the difficult seasons built in you. And then there will be those who respond with skepticism, with the need to find a natural explanation for what is clearly supernatural, with a discomfort at the evidence of God's specific intervention in an ordinary life. Because if God does that for this person, then the implications for their own life are ones they are not yet ready to engage. Handle all of these responses with love, with patience, with the quiet confidence of someone who knows what they experienced and does not need anyone else's agreement to sustain that knowing. The miracle will speak for itself in time. You do not need to defend it. Let me close with what I believe God most wants to say to you through this message. You did something recently that took courage, that took faith, that took a willingness to trust Him in an area where trust was genuinely costly, and He noticed. He was moved by it. Not in the way that a transaction is registered, in the way that a father is moved when he watches his child choose rightly in a genuinely difficult moment, with the specific, deep, tender pride of a God who loves you completely and who has been walking alongside you through every season of your preparation and who recognizes in your recent act the evidence of everything He has been building in you. He is proud of you, not for perfection, not for having it all together, not for a faith that never wavers or a life that never struggles, for this, for the specific, real, costly act of faithfulness that you offered Him recently from whatever place in your story you are currently standing. And His response to that offering is not a delayed future reward. It is a present, active, already in motion miracle that He crafted specifically for your story before the foundation of the world. It is on its way. Stay faithful. Stay open. Stay in the posture of trust that your recent action established. And when it arrives, when you stand in the middle of what God has done and feel the specific, breathtaking, this was made for me quality of a miracle that has your name written all over it, remember this moment. Remember that heaven saw what you did. Remember that faithfulness was not wasted. Remember that the God who promises is always, without exception, the God who delivers. You unlocked something real. Now watch God be faithful to it.